Hello, I'm Angela Aurora Medway-Smith. Welcome to the 2026 series Bitesize Business Basics. We have 6 sessions of short, succinct presentations from experts who will help you up-level your business. I hope you enjoy them. Hello and welcome to Bite-Size Business Basics. My name is Angela Aurora Medway-Smith. I'm the Practical Mystic, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to kick off this 2026 series with the incredible Nicky Price. I'll introduce Nicky before she comes on. So Nicky is an advanced transformation therapist, an RTT trainer, coach, co-author and speaker who works with high achieving women in business to dissolve the hidden subconscious patterns that are quietly capping their income, visibility and growth. So after 27 years in corporate IT and digital marketing, Nicky left that career and without the structure of corporate life to hide behind, every pattern she'd been carrying for decades surfaced at once. The perfectionism she'd called high standards, the overworking she'd called dedication, the visibility, fear she'd called professionalism. She didn't recognize them as patterns, they felt like her personality. And that experience is the foundation of her work. And Nicky's methodology works simultaneously across mind, body, and energy, combining clinical hypnotherapy, RTT, IFS, NLP, somatic and nervous system work to address the root cause of patterns like imposter syndrome, money blocks, visibility fear, overgiving, procrastination, and perfectionism. And she has a proprietary truth formula and the upper limit reset, which is her signature program, that have helped women across the world break through ceilings that strategy alone could never touch. So, Nicky, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you today. And your talk is called Why You Keep Hitting the Same Ceiling and Why It Has Nothing to Do with Your Strategy. And I've experienced your work, and which is why I've asked you to come along and chat to my authors and the community. And I am just so excited that you will be able to share your magic with them. Welcome, welcome, Nicky.
Thank you so much. What a lovely welcome. Thank you. All right, so I did do a little presentation more to keep me on track because I know you're quite limited with time. So if that's okay, am I able to just share my screen from here, or do I have to?
Yeah, let me make sure that I have allowed you to share the
Yeah,
screen.
there it is. Yeah. So I can send a request. I think send
Yep,
a.
that's great. Yep, all done.
Okay, so should I be able to share now? Yes, I should. Okay, so let me start this as a presentation. You should just be able. Are you just seeing like a screen full of nothing at the
Just
moment?
seeing your home screen at the
Yeah.
moment.
Okay, so let me do slideshow. So you should be, there we go. See
Fantastic.
that?
Yep,
Yeah. All
perfect.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get started. Yeah, so I've called it as you said. I thought this would be useful for any kind of women in business. I just think it's what I work with all the time. It's what I see over and over again, these patterns that come up. So it's why you keep hitting the same ceiling and why it has nothing to do with strategy. Now, I think you kind of filled in everything I do. I am a transformation therapist and coach, and I do work predominantly with women in business, but I do work with anxiety a lot as well, kind of in my local area. But online, very much, I work with women in business who are, they're capable, they're self aware, but they can see these patterns that, or just the things and the frustrations that they keep hitting these limits that they can't seem to explain. And as you said, I know this territory very, very well. The corporate structure hides a great deal of this. And it's only when we really sort of set up our own business that we're able to see some of these patterns and the things that just all seem to come up together that we had no idea. We thought they were just who we are, but actually they're patterns that, you know, that have a deeper root to them. So nearly a decade later, I left corporate after 27 years, and nearly a decade later and hundreds of one-on-one clients, I've been able to really help all those people to break free from these patterns and to, you know, truly transform their lives. And I want to share with you today a little bit how you can do that too. So I've called this Why You Keep Hitting the Same Ceiling, but, you know, obviously let me just explain what the ceiling is, because we don't really walk around saying, oh, I've hit a ceiling or I've hit an upper limit. We call it something a little bit different. So this is kind of what it might look like in your business. Just a few examples. You know, maybe you've done a great launch and then you find yourself not following up with all the people, or you get a big client or a prospect and you find you hesitate at that last moment, or you perhaps drop your price, or you just lose them at the last moment, or you have, maybe you're always attracting people that say, oh, I can't afford your prices. Maybe you're procrastinating on the one thing that you know will move you forward the most. Or visibility, that's a huge one. You may be, and this happened to a client and a friend of mine, who every time she was about to get on stage or to do something, she'd lose her voice or she would develop a cough. And I would always say, isn't that interesting? And she finally decided to have a session. Or, you know, sometimes when your income hits that new level, you reach a new high level in your business, and then the next month everything comes crashing down, or huge bills come in and it just seems to bring you back down to where you were before. Overworking, overgiving, that's another huge one. But there could be some, you know, much more subtle versions. There could be, you know, like imposter syndrome, that feeling of I'm just not quite good enough, or you know that you're perhaps a lot better than some of your competitors, and yet they're the ones getting the recognition, and you just seem to feel like you're unseen and you're unheard. Or, you know, maybe there's perfectionism always showing up in your business. Or I just need to tweak this or get this right before I get it out there. Or maybe there's just pure simple money blocks. You just don't seem to be able to attract the clients, even though you're really good at what to do. And so here's the thing that I really want to say, you know, this is not self-sabotage. That's what we're told it always is. That's what it feels like. We're sabotaging ourselves. It's actually protection. It's your central nervous system actually doing what it was designed to do. It's trying to keep you within your safe boundaries of your identity. And the problem is that the beliefs that we created that form our identity were created a very long time ago, well before you set up your business. They were created in your childhood. So let me show you what I mean. Why is it not moving? There we go. So how was your identity formed? Well, it was formed in that age group of 0 to 7, or more specifically 2 to 7, because in the very early years as a baby, we're in delta brainwaves, which is basically sleep. But then from age 2 to 7, we're in the theta state. Now, for many people, you understand what the theta state is. It's actually hypnosis. So we're essentially in a trance, in this kind of dreamlike trance state for those early years. And essentially what that means is that we don't have the prefrontal cortex fully developed, which means that we don't have the ability to critically analyze things. And so everything that's going on around you, you're just absorbing everything. You're being programmed by everything you see, everything you hear, everything that you kind of, even the things that you don't see, but it's the realizations that you have about who you are in the world, how your family shows up in the world, your environment, even your position in the family. Two people in the family, two siblings, will have a completely different experience. So you're watching carefully things like how your adults handle their relationships, how they handle money, love, conflict, or visibility. And based on what you see and hear, you're making these deep subconscious beliefs about yourself. But here's the thing, and probably one of the most important things today is it's not just what goes into your mind in that time. It's just that the beliefs that you create right there and then, it is then it's the strongest force in the human psyche to act in accordance with our own self-concept and our own self-belief. And so we must act in accordance with those beliefs. But some of those beliefs were created as a child, and are therefore no longer relevant. So those sort of beliefs, how they kind of grow up with you, if you're constantly seeing people rowing about money around you, then you're going to think, well, money's not a good thing to have. Or if you're constantly judged and criticized and this causes you shame or embarrassment, then you're going to want to stay out of the limelight. So when it comes to public speaking or putting yourself forward, you're going to have this fear, and everybody has that fear anyway, fear of rejection when we stand on a stage. But when you've been criticized or judged so much as a child, then you're going to feel that a lot more, and you're going to feel it not just in your mind thinking, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. You're going to feel it somatically. Your body is going to try and put you into the fight-flight response and get you the heck out of there. And I've seen people literally do that. Their feet start to turn towards the door and they start shaking. For people who've been told, and who hasn't, oh, you need to work hard to get somewhere in life, then they're going to think their whole life that I have to earn my worth through hard work and effort. And if you were only perhaps ever rewarded when you achieved something at school, as a lot of parents do, they're not very good with showing love, but when you achieve something, they show you love, then that child learns to think that their value is linked to how much they achieve. And I saw this very recently with a client that once she got made redundant, her whole identity collapsed. She couldn't understand why she had a complete breakdown from this. For some people, wanting more. If you were ever told as a child, oh, for goodness sake, you can't have that, we're not made of money, and they were shamed or, belittled in some way, then wanting more, you will have learned, makes people angry. Therefore, your mind is going to say, well, we don't want any more. Let's just stay at this level. And these become the identity of who you are, the story of who you keep telling yourself you are, and therefore you have to act in accordance with that self-concept. And so it's then going to actively work to prove you right. So your whole life, you will find, will start to reflect these beliefs. But the thing is, you probably don't know what these beliefs are. You've long since forgotten the beliefs you created. All you see is the patterns. So let's just look at some examples, because of the wounded child, when they've created those beliefs, then they have to learn to cope with that shame, with that embarrassment. And that's when these coping mechanisms come up. And these tend to show up most when you're trying to do something different, when you're trying to grow, or when you're under stress. And that's when some of your patterns will start to go. So if our parents were cross or distracted all the time, we learn to be helpful. And then how that grows up with you is you then become a people pleaser with no boundaries. If you were constantly judged or criticized, then you will learn to think, well, how can I stay out of the way? If I make sure that my work is really, really good and I overthink everything, every possibility, that will keep me safe. And that then grows up to be the overthinker, the procrastinator, the perfectionist. I've lived and breathed those ones. If you constantly lived in fear, if you perhaps grew up in maybe a volatile or just, lots of noise and lots of shouting, and you've just felt a little bit unsafe, or maybe you had a scary experience as a child, then you're going to have anxiety or no confidence, or you may start to just overgive or overwork if you don't feel enough inside. You're just going to try and get your needs met. Now, anger is a really interesting one. If you don't feel enough inside, often this is one of the protectors that comes in. So we have the protectors and the sort of the defendants, if you like. Now, the protectors are the fierce ones that kind of come up like anger. If you didn't feel enough inside because maybe perhaps you weren't as intelligent as your brother or your sister, or you were compared and maybe that made you feel hurt, or maybe you were just told you were a worthless piece of, whatever, as many people are, because their parents just didn't know how to, how to be emotionally strong to bring their children up. But every time your own feeling of not enoughness is triggered, perhaps at work with a criticism or judgment, then this is going to flare up, this anger, or it may show up in your relationships as codependency. You become needy. So there's many different ways that our incredible wounded inner child learns to actually cope. But how does this work? So what happens when your business starts to grow a little beyond the level that your subconscious believes is safe for you? Then what happens is I'd like to explain it in a way like a thermostat, really, because your subconscious has like a set point of where it feels safe. Safe for what it believes you're worthy of, safe it's how visible you are, how much money you can receive. All of this forms in your nervous system as what your set point of safety is. And that feels familiar to your mind, because what is familiar to your mind equals safe, because it's kept you safe throughout your entire past. It just feels like you. And just like a thermostat regulates the temperature in a room, when it hits the temperature, it then just switches itself off. And this is what happens with us. When you start to exceed that set point, when your income goes up, when you decide you want to go and stand on stage, that all of what used to feel familiar no longer feels familiar. And to your central nervous system, that is an immediate red flag. And so your system gets uncomfortable because it no longer matches your internal identity. Now, I think Gay Hendricks covers this really well in a book called The Big Leap, which he calls the upper limit problem. And that's exactly what's happening when you're kind of hitting that thermostat. So the problem, this is probably the most important thing. This brings me to what I think is the most important thing to explain today, and what I really want you to hear, is that the problem that you see on the surface level is not the real problem. So what you see in your conscious level thinking mind in your business is, the imposter syndrome, I don't feel good enough, or why is it that I can't seem to get the higher level money? Why is it that I'm procrastinating when I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and I sit here and I start doom scrolling? Why do I do that? Or the perfectionism. Why is it that I'm tweaking all this stuff right before, when I know it's okay and I know I can do it? Why do I keep doing that? These are the things you see. Why do I have this fear of getting on stage? Why do I have this fear of making a post about something that I feel very strongly about? Or very common one for women in business, why am I always overgiving, overworking, and then I end up feeling quite resentful about it all? Because these are not the real problem. They are just the symptom, the surface level symptom of the problem. And these are the surface problems, or the surface level expression of the deeper wound of what you've been trying to cover up. And what lives beneath that is those beliefs that you created somewhere before 8 years old. And it's usually that a part of you was rejected or shamed, or you learned that it was not acceptable about you. Don't be too noisy, don't be a show off, don't be this person. We're all told that over and over again, perhaps as a child. Or don't be shy, push yourself out there, And so we're told all of these things. So have a think about, what did you hear the most as a child? What felt true about you in those days? And so what's really going on is that your nervous system is trying to protect you. And when we start to look at these problems as protection rather than as a problem that needs to be fixed, then we can start to make some headway with what's going on. Because when you've created a belief that I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy, or any of the kind of the core needs that we need to have met as a child, if we believe that we don't have it, that we are not lovable, that we are not worthy, that we are not good enough in some way, then it's almost like we put a new lens on. Your central nervous system is triggered forever unless you do this level work. And essentially what you're doing is you're putting a lens on, and then you look at the entire world through that lens of, but I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I don't deserve this sort of thing. And so when you have that lens on for the world, then the world can only show you what you believe to be true about you. And that then reinforces the belief because you keep seeing the same patterns and the same experiences. But all it is that child version of you that learned to adapt and create a coping mechanism that made perfect sense in that moment, but just not now. And so when we treat the symptoms, when we have coaching or when we go for counseling or when we do some sort of business strategy stuff, I'm all for, of course, we need strategy for our business. But when you're seeing the same thing, you know, I used to be able to show two people in my business when I used to do affiliate marketing. Sorry, excuse me. And I could never understand why they couldn't achieve what I was achieving. You know, I'd show them the exact same and one would do okay and the other one really wouldn't. And they were working the same hours and contributing the same thing. So what's different? It's their own inner belief system about what they're worthy of. So you can treat the symptom, you can do the strategies, you can push through, you can force through, but it's like painting over damp. Eventually it's going to come back through again because your mind will always try and drag you back to what is familiar, because your mind's a little bit lazy and your nervous system just wants you to be safe because that's its role, to keep you alive and to keep you safe. And so what is familiar from the familiar past, it believes is what your future should be. But of course we don't want that. We want growth. We want a bigger business. We want all this stuff for ourselves. So what can we do? Because we don't want to have these beliefs. We don't even know what these beliefs are. So here's some journaling prompts that will really start to help you to get to the root of this. Instead of asking how to fix the symptom or the pattern, because that just keeps you focused on thinking you're broken in some way and that you need fixing, which is simply not true. But the more powerful question is, why might this pattern, whatever this pattern is, why might this pattern make perfect sense for me? Because every pattern has an origin. And when you find it, you get your power back because you take away the power from the pattern of why you're doing it. Here's another question. Instead of asking, how do I fix this? Ask yourself, why might I not want this? So if you're going for like, right, my goal is I want £10,000 a month for my business, why might I not want this? If this has eluded you for a long time, why might I not want this? What would actually having it cost you? So it's time to really list out. When I first did this exercise about 5 years ago, I was told I had to list out 50 reasons why I didn't want what I said I wanted. That's really hard, by the way. But just do 10, you know, just try and do 10 things or 10 reasons why your mind might not want you to have that, because there are some, trust me. Or another question, if I did have this, what might I lose? Am I going to lose some freedom? Am I going to lose some belonging or some relationships? Are people going to get jealous? You know, what's happened in your past where perhaps you started to be the golden child where you pushed back down again if you were successful? You know, what is the real fear? These are the real fears. You know, this does make sense. The pattern that you're having does make sense, even when you can't sort of logically think why it would happen now. It makes sense from the past. So in the context of where this came from, there's a reason for it. Somewhere being seen has, you know, and being successful has led to something painful, embarrassing, or shameful. Or maybe you just grew up in an environment where that's not for people like us. Maybe that's what you heard all the time. This isn't for people like us. You know, the woman who overworks all the time and over delivers all the time, somewhere her worth became conditional on how much she delivered or how successful she was. So These aren't our character flaws. They're the child version of you who's learned to adapt in order to get her needs met. But the problem is they are no longer serving you in your current life. And no matter how much you try and affirm your way out of it or coach your way out of it, this is a nervous system response. This is something that your mind and your body have learned to do together, and they do it very well, and it's automatic. And you can't push through these protection mechanisms for long because your mind is going to try and drag you back all the time. Okay. So let's just look briefly at 2 of the 6 most common patterns, just to give this some context for you, and yeah, just kind of bring it to life for you a little bit. So money blocks. I thought we'd look at money blocks and visibility because both of those are probably really important ones for us in business, right? So money blocks, for example, they're very rarely about money at the end of the day. So on the surface, undercharging or discounting, I used to do that all the time. I'd make a decision about somebody and start undercharging before they'd even asked, And this could have a whole heap of things going on underneath. It could be that, if I charge too much, people won't like me. So in the past, there's been some level of, I won't be liked if I have money, or, maybe there's a belief that rich people are greedy or untrustworthy. If your mind believes that you don't like a rich person, therefore you will never become one, because your mind will not try and make you into something that you don't like. So fall in love with rich people and the richness and the luxuries if that's what you're trying to achieve. Inconsistent income, that roller coaster income, we've all had that, right? It arrives, you have a big month, and then somehow it just goes. Either a huge bill comes in, or the next month it's just nothing, and it just seems to regulate again like that thermostat. And that's because it could be any number of different beliefs. Here's an example. Your system is just used to the pressure and problem solving. That has become the familiar. It's not what you want, but if you grew up in a chaotic environment where you were always having to think about, you were always having to or always had pressure, and you were always having to think about how to problem solve, then that's familiar to your mind. And even though it's horrible, it's familiar, and familiar equals safe. And overflow, and having any level of overflow in the bank account, was so unfamiliar to your mind that it makes you get rid of it as soon as possible. That's why people will spend the moment it comes into their bank account. As fast as it comes in, it goes back out again. Or income is not reflecting your effort. You work harder and harder, and you see other people around you all achieving, and you don't seem to be, you're working so hard and you don't seem to get the effort. But, likely you've got beliefs like rich people are greedy, or you have to work hard for success, and that, the truly wealthy, they really don't, do they? They swan around and they in their jets, and they don't truly work that hard. They might have done to begin with, but receiving more for less effort is not familiar to your mind. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel safe. So inability to receive. Now, this is a really interesting one. A lot of people have this. A lot of women have this. Receiving blocks is not just about money. It's about receiving anything. Compliments. How do you receive a compliment? How do you receive support if somebody offers you support? Because if you don't accept those very easily, you probably don't receive money very easily either. And very often that one stems from learning that it's down to you. Nobody's coming to help you. Nobody was there for you in that moment, and you made a belief, well, it's down to me. Nobody's helping me here. So when we are always thinking it's down to me, if you're looking at the world through a lens of it's down to me, you can't receive very well. You can't receive support. You can't receive help because you believe it's down to you. And so it triggers this kind of vulnerability in you that it feels unsafe for you to receive. And that's a very deep one, actually, the receiving block. And then dropping your price in the middle of a conversation. Yeah, I used to do that. This is your nervous system almost trying to prevent you from being rejected or judged or disappointed. So, if you find yourself discounting, ask yourself, am I responding to their need when they haven't even said what their need is? Or is this just me trying to regulate my own discomfort here about the risk of being rejected? So there's ways and means around these. And the last one, hitting the same income ceiling. This is really about slowing down when you've just hit some, real momentum, then you find yourself pulling back and diverting to the old patterns. And this is because it's unfamiliar to your mind. This new level of success is not yet familiar. And it feels that any level of growth is not familiar. So we're already facing that block the minute we try and do something different. And your subconscious is keeping you at the level it knows at the old identity, because your old identity hasn't caught up with your ambition yet. Now, of course, there are many, many other different variations of money blocks. I've actually got a whole module on money blocks in my program. But of course, these are all really around holding money, receiving money, earning more money, and expanding and growth in your business, all to do with money. All right, so that's money blocks in general. And let's look at the visibility. And there's two different types of visibility here. There's the visibility where you avoid, like it says here, where you avoid speaking gigs, or you avoid putting yourself out there on video or on stages, or you're not posting consistently. And then there's the other one where there's a whole visibility thing going on here where you are doing all that, but you don't feel seen and you don't feel heard. You could walk into a room and nobody seems to see you, recognize you, or hear you. And those are two sides of the same coin of visibility. So what could be lying underneath those? So if you're avoiding the speaking gigs or the video, then maybe you were criticized or judged too often as a child. Maybe a teacher, I can't tell you how often that one comes up in my sessions, a teacher embarrassing the child in public. That came up for a guy fairly recently who had this urge to run to the bathroom. And when we went back to the scenes, it was because he was 4 years old, not paying attention. The teacher pulled him out, and he was so embarrassed he couldn't answer the question that he wet himself. And so, of course, the mind steps in and says, right, we must get you to the bathroom and you will never do this again. Once we healed that for him, once he was seen, he's absolutely fine now. So not posting consistently, taking up space, meant being told you were too much. If you're putting your opinions or your voice out of there, you were probably either criticized or told to just calm down or behave, or just not be too noisy. I grew up in hotels, so I was always told, seen and not heard. My dad was the manager, so we had to be seen to be looking good, and but just not heard. And so having an opinion was not good for me. And so I used to do all of these. Having an opinion led to conflict or rejection. So, with expansion comes responsibility, and that to your mind is too fearful. It's too risky. You have to understand your mind is always weighing up risk versus reward with anything that you're trying to do. And if you're feeling the resistance, then your mind is believing that there is more risk to it than there is reward. And yeah, this one comes up. It's surprisingly often. It's not one that you'd think, but outshining a struggling parent has come up several times in my practice of, where you're kind of shrinking in rooms where you could really be going out there and doing things. The success that comes with that, or the being seen, has stemmed back to, well, mum looked after me all this time, or dad abandoned us and I can't outshine her, or I can't outshine my dad who tried his whole life to be successful. And these things really hold you back when you wouldn't think they would, but they really do. And so, yeah, this one about feeling unseen amongst kind of less capable people when you really should be being seen. This is more about the whole subconscious basically saying, no, you're going to pull back at those moments. No one's going to see you because it's not safe. And very often that one comes from a very, volatile home where there was lots of shouting. So with these kind of patterns, what can we do? And with all the patterns that comes up, we don't just want to know what all the problems are, because we know what the problems are, right? We want to know how to deal with them. We want to know how to be clear of them. So what actually does work? Well, if you're at the point where coaching hasn't worked, maybe counseling or even some forms of therapy haven't worked, or willpower, really trying to push through, because sometimes that is all you need. If it's only a small fear, as we know, there is always the fear of doing something new. Your mind is always going to be, this is new. We don't like this. But as long as you can identify that it is only that, then you can push through that just by a kind of gentle process, little bit, small steps, do a small, little bit of a time exposure therapy, I think they call it, where you just do a little bit of it until your mind accepts it as familiar. But when there's a deep rooted emotional pattern going on that your subconscious is saying, no, it is not safe for us to do this because of something that's happened in the past, that is something different. And this is where you need to do the deeper work if you want to have the lasting transformation. Because real lasting change has to happen at the very same level that the pattern, the defensive pattern, was created. And that happens in 3 areas: mind, body, and energy. And this is why so few therapies address all 3 areas. And you have to address all 3 areas when it is that deep. Because the surface work only reaches the surface. That's the painting over the damp. To dissolve something at the root, you have to go to the root. And then you have to free the emotions. So what do we mean by that? Well, in the mind, that is the self-concept. That's what I've been talking about today. Those are the beliefs and the thoughts that you create and the stories that you tell yourself over and over again. And then you have the experiences which then match those thoughts and you keep thinking them. That's the cycle that goes on in the mind. But then in the body, very often when there's trauma as a child, and it could be small trauma or it could be really big trauma, but that trauma, the first thing that child does is hold their breath. So if you're slapped as a child, you go, in that moment, we don't breathe properly. And when we start to not breathe properly, our body stores the emotions. If there's a strong emotional response anyway, shame, embarrassment, fear, hurt, feeling not lovable, all those feelings are really strong emotions for a child. And the mind just numbs them down and hides them away because they're too painful to deal with for that child. If that child believes that they're not lovable, that child would die. And that's been proven that the kids who are just left have a very much shorter lifespan than those who are shown love as a child and picked up and cuddled. And it's the same with all humans, isn't it? It's the same with humans, it's the same with animals, it's even the same with plants. If you speak to them nicely, the energy frequency that creates is somatic. You feel it in your body. So we have to address the body as well, the nervous system, the emotions. So emotions are simply energy in motion. That's what emotions are. And so when we have a strong emotion that we have suppressed, then it gets stuck in the body and we have to release that too. And if anyone's a Dr. Joe Dispenza fan here, then it's thoughts are the language of the mind, feelings are the language of the body, and what you think and what you feel creates your personal reality, which creates your personality. That is a Dr. Joe Dispenza. That one is stuck in my mind over and over, and he's right. The mind, body, and energy. But the energy part is really just a collection of the body and the mind, and that creates your vibe, your aura. That's what you can detect when you walk in a room and you think, oh, I don't like this person. That's what you're reading. You're reading their energy, their vibe. You don't know you're even doing it, but you do. And when you do recognize something and you just think, oh, this feels great, that person I feel like I've known for ages, watch out for that one. Because when you feel, particularly in relationships, when you think, oh yeah, we got on so well, it's just the part of you that is recognizing something from the past and goes, oh yeah, that's familiar. That's why you feel connected. But if that past was not a good past, it's why we keep repeating bad relationships if we had bad relationships in the beginning. So watch out for those. But that is what you detect. And these create your vibrational frequency. And so this is why I created the 5-step truth formula, in all honesty, because I was seeing these things come on over and over again. And whilst my framework here is completely unique to me, some of the very top transformation experts in the world all still operate the mind, body, and energy approach. Okay, so this is just my way of being able to address it in sessions, but also in being able to share it with people so that they understand what to do. So I'll just take you through that so you can understand how to be free of these patterns. So the first thing, of course, is to notice the pattern. It's ask yourself with those journal prompts that we looked at earlier, why might I not want what I'm trying to get? Because if you're looking at your life and you're thinking, this is the area that's really holding me back, maybe it's your business, maybe it's money, maybe it's relationships, those are the top ones. So look at the patterns. What can you see that's been repeated over and over? Look with curiosity instead of pushing it away and thinking, oh, here we go again. Start to get curious, start to understand what this is doing for you. Then find the underlying subconscious belief. That's the hardest bit, because this is not intellectual analysis. But if you understand your childhood and you understand what was going on around you, you might be able to make the connection between your behaviors from the sorts of things we've been talking about today. But that's the most tricky bit to do on your own. And this is why hypnosis is very useful for that, because we can access the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind will tell you. Then we bring compassion to the root cause. This was a decision by a child in a specific context. Show her the context has changed. It's safe to just let it go and you can breathe it out. It can be that simple. But sometimes it takes more. Just keep persisting. Breathe it out. Where do you feel it in the body? Breathe it out, because that is the emotional and somatic work. You will know where you start to feel it. When you start to get conscious more of how your body feels, some people immediately say, oh yeah, I feel that in my stomach. Women store a lot in their stomach around their tummy area. And then hypnosis to install some new beliefs. And that can be you just recording your own voice with what you want to hear late at night. We're in a natural state of hypnosis right before we go to sleep and when we first wake up in the morning. So if you want to program your mind with anything, do it in those two times, because that is the most significant for you. All right, so we've covered quite a lot. It was a very kind of whirlwind tour, but I want you to know, that the ceiling that you keep hitting in that area of your life isn't a reflection of your potential. It's just a reflection of your current programming. And the work is not to fight that part of you. It's to understand it, to understand the role, to thank it with compassion, with love, with gratitude, and to let it go, to say it's time. And these parts that have been there for so long are really understanding, and we can talk to them in hypnosis, and we ask the part how old it thinks you are, and it still thinks you're 6 years old. And once it knows you're not, it just goes. It's so lovely to witness. So the next level of you in any area that you're struggling in is not about pushing harder or about more strategy. It's just about up leveling your identity. And so if you want to find out more about what's running underneath, I've devised a quiz, which is really simple to do. It'll take you about 5 minutes, totally free. And you can do that just by going to that link, mebutfree.com/quiz. Or if you know that there's something really, really deep, then I do free 45-minute calls to just kind of work that through with you. And you can do that by scanning that code or just going through that. So that's all I have, Angela. I hope that wasn't too long. It was a bit longer than I think you said, but
Don't worry. Honestly, Nikki, that was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic. I could see so many parts of myself in what you were describing.
oh, what's that noise? Is that me?
I have a storm. Storm is coming in somewhere.
That is
If
that?
you stop sharing, maybe it's coming through on.
I wonder what that is. Let me mute.
Okay, let me just give you some feedback while you're working out where the storm is coming from.
That's gone now. I don't know what that was. Sorry.
Oh, bless you. Um, you've literally finished, and then somebody's just literally just joined. Is just joining as well, so it's really, really strange. Um, yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. I hadn't realised that between 2 and 8 these things happen. I wish I'd been told that as a parent.
Yeah. We all worry about that. I think the amount of parents I've just they've got, oh my God, I must have really messed up
Yeah.
my
Oh
kids.
my goodness. I
No, we're not.
mean, yeah. And, I'm trying to rewind to my own childhood and, oh, right. So Madeline, Maddie, we don't see you. So you can join, and I can give you a little, um, just a little synopsis of what Nikki's covered, which has been incredible. Um, yeah, I'm definitely going to do the quiz for myself and do the prompts. They were absolutely, absolutely amazing. So, Caroline, have you got any questions for Nikki?
Thank you, Nikki. That was really brilliant. And it's interesting because in the kind of work that I do with my clients, it is to help them undo their blocks. So I was listening and thinking, yeah, that resonates, that's something similar. But actually, like you just said, Angela, it's that what happened between 2 and 7, because when you were talking, I was thinking, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. But the thing that I wanted to ask just a little bit more about is that thing when you covered it really well about when you know that you are just not being seen when all of the other people who are less brilliant or not as accomplished or all of that. And you started to talk about it, and then I think you moved on to the next next thing quite quickly. And
I think
that's
I
like,
looked at the time and thought,
yeah, exactly. But what, because you explained it as it's basically this safety mechanism, the nervous system saying you need to be safe, it's not going to be safe. But can you just expand a little bit more about that? Because I think that is something that a lot of people really,
yeah,
really have.
it does come up a lot. And as I say, there are two totally different sides to visibility. And it is that, but they kind of have the same root cause though. Because very often with visibility is it's just not safe to be seen, but that can show up in so many different ways. For example, I had a client quite early on in my therapy career who came to me for weight issues. Now, I don't work with weight issues unless they say a few keywords. And this lady definitely said a few keywords. She kept saying, I'm big. She never said I'm fat or overweight. She just kept saying I'm big. And I thought, yeah, there's something there. And when we got to the scenes with her, it was very much about her mum was being beaten up by her dad or her mum's partner. And she wanted to be bigger to defend her mum. And so it is those tiny little beliefs that we make that can shape our entire life. And so not being seen, it could be something to do with that. It could be, I don't like the way I look. It's not safe for me. We will make excuses, or it's way more subtle. It can be so subtle. And this was for me. I used to walk into a room feeling good, feeling like I know what I'm talking about. I've got lots of friends, so I'm a friendly person. I know there's nothing fundamentally wrong with me, but I would end up being on my own in there because I would hesitate. I would hesitate at those important moments of, I just couldn't seem to create a conversation that felt natural. And that was the way that my mind was holding me back because it didn't feel safe. I was taught be seen and not heard. I grew up in hotel managers, we were the managers' children. That was just something I learned. That was the intervention that my mind did. So it can be so subtle sometimes, or it can be quite major, where you walk in and you just get completely ignored, or you're standing on stage and I've literally seen people's feet start to turn and they start to shake. They go into full fight flight response, and the mind is literally saying, get the hell out of here. And they're trying to deliver a talk, and I just want to go up and hug them and just go, it's okay, you're going to be fine. But you can't push through that. That is a somatic response. And so it can be very subtle, but the root cause is almost always the same. It's not safe to be seen, or I shouldn't be seen, or there's a part of me that is too embarrassing to be seen. And it's those parts. And it can, as I say, it can show up in a million different ways, but it can be very subtle or it can be very, so there's not too much I can elaborate on that for you other than just to be aware that it is I shouldn't be seeing. So why shouldn't you be seen? Just ask them, what is it that they're fearful of if they are seen? Because those kind of three questions I found to be really useful in just the pre-chats with helping people in coaching rather than if they don't want the full therapy session. I hope
Thank
that
you,
kind
Nikki,
of
and
answers
thank
that.
you also for all of your work as well and everything that
Thank
you're doing for
you.
people. It's
Oh,
really beautiful.
thank you.
It's fascinating, thank you. And I know how powerful as well RTT is. I've in the Energy Healers Oracle book series, I had an RTT therapist, and she shared, but when she was deciding which story to share, she shared so many stories with me. She works with children,
Mm.
and that some of the things preventing children going to school. So she's up, that's her level, but absolutely fascinating. Do you work with EFT as well?
I've done EFT, I've done some EFT. I don't use it so much. I tend to do
Okay.
more kind of energetic architecture, which is more releasing stuff rather than kind of tapping on the meridian points. But it's all good. That is all works on the somatic side. So any of those kind of things, as I say, you need the mind stuff because without the mindset stuff and the deep rooted core beliefs, then you could release the energy. But if you keep thinking the same things, the energy is going to build back up again. And the same
Mm.
with, you can release the beliefs, but if you don't release the emotions, you've still got the same energetic codes and the same vibe and the same, that you're putting out there. And so you need to address the two of them together so that they
Mm.
create the energetic, which is the third one. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So, would you mind sharing your last slide again,
yeah.
so that Madeline can see it? And I'm going to make sure that she has a copy of the recording as well, but also just invite her to ask any questions that she might have come with. I know it's a bit blind, but just in case there's something that she wants to know that you might be able to answer. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Curbside, there we go. Is that the one? Is that the one you mean?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
that's the one. Yes. And yes, absolutely happy to have, a chat with anybody. You've recorded it, so if you're putting that out, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Angela and Nikki and Caroline. Sorry to pop in on such a small group. I literally just the advert just popped up. I don't even know where, and when you just kind of go, "Oh, I just feel like a call to that." So I just clicked on it
Perfect.
instantly. So I don't even know really. I didn't know what I'm coming into. But thank you. It actually
Oh, you
does
don't
feel
know what you missed.
relevant. Yeah, when you're just like, why is life bringing me in here in this moment? And the question of what is capping my growth and it was really interesting what you just said about the what part of us doesn't want to be seen. And the last example you gave was about, I can't remember the words you used, but something like well, for me, I think it's like I'm too weird to be seen. Like you said something like, like I can't remember what you said funny, but it landed with me. And it's interesting because the journey I've been on is since deciding to like go full time with my self-employed healing work. And then I've basically hit this kind of point of realizing that I'm exhausting myself because I'm running these performance mechanisms, which are based in like that kind of age two, that like the child. And I've basically been in the last few weeks in this journey of actually realizing that my young child, well, and still exists on some levels, was actually quite autistic. And I'm like going, oh my gosh, I had literally not seen this my whole life. And actually, I've spent my whole life with these layers of, nice, smiley, functional me over just the genuine, like, organic expression of me. And so I feel like I'm in this point where it's like everything's kind of slightly unraveling so that I can create a healthier baseline for my work going forwards because it's like it's not going to be sustainable to build a healing holistic business on a basis of overworking through this performing energy. So Yeah, really interesting.
100%. And there's no accidents as well. Do you know what I mean? When you saw the ad and you thought this is part of your journey, you're obviously on a little bit of an enlightenment journey at the moment to help you to propel you forwards. This is where you're supposed to be, and this is the work that you are supposed to be doing. I just put those questions back up because sometimes when we're really trying to work towards something, sometimes it's helpful to look at those questions and to decide, why might I not want that? Because your mind is trying to protect you and not sabotage you. And when we look at it from
Yeah.
that perspective, it takes a whole new ball game. So yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Nicky. And thank you to Caroline and Madeline for joining us today. I will be recording this and it will be available on my YouTube channel. And I'll make sure that all your links are placed in the notes as well, Nicky, so that people can get in touch with you. I'm going to stop the recording now and just bear with me. Hello, thanks for watching. Sign up for more on Cariad Spiritual by scanning the QR code here and check out the show notes for access to our incredible experts. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye.